Good. Just refreshing. Okay, we're on. So welcome, Mordechai, our guest, and welcome Ruti, and welcome me, and hello. Today we named the live session When the Boat is Rocked. We had a very rockin' month in Israel. We also mentioned it in the previous live sessions. I will give the tiny introduction for the people who watch us for the first time. What we're doing in those live sessions with What Really Is, usually Ruti and me, sometimes with our guests. Our wish is to look at life, at ourselves through different, through different topics and experience and inquire the way we got used to looking at them through the dimension of thoughts, conclusions, ideas, all the realm of thoughts. And what does it look like? What does it feel like? And how would life be when we approach, when we live out of the dimension that is not made of thoughts, what we call what really is? Now, I will say what Ruti usually said, we don't want to switch one thought with another, an idea with another. This doesn't work for us. Let's try this idea. No, the idea is to acknowledge that this is our tendency. This is what our mind wants to do. But what if we don't tempt it? If we're not tempted to go back and live out of another idea, but from what really is. Now, our river today would be the tree of life, which is, I think in many ways what we're here to do. This what really is the tree of life. And we have the tree of knowledge, right? This is what it's called in English. And this is a topic, this is more than a topic. This is something that you two are studying for a few weeks already. I would even say a few months. You have a studying group and you're also exploring this, learning this, just the two of you. And this is something that you are doing, Mordechai, for quite a while. I will give a tiny knowledge about your background. You founded the Amuta organization that is called in Hebrew Kolot. Kolot, the Hebrew translations means voices. And it comes from the wish to connect important people, influential people in Israel to a Jewish, pluralistic, deep conversation. So you were a major player in Jewish pluralism in Israel. And from here, I would like to hear a bit from you about your current project, your current doing. You also wrote a book. So how about you give us a tiny taste of where you are at today even? How are you? We also had a Hebrew live session before this one, so we're a bit warmed up. So yeah, let's just plunge in and we'll let the topic guide us. And Ruti, you will also read something very, very, very meaningful regarding this previous month in Jewish culture and in Israel. in Israel history, I would say. Okay, so I will be quiet now.
Good morning. So I think the best way to dive into the discussion that we'll have together is to briefly talk about my move from Kolot into what I'm doing today. For many years, I was a big believer, and I still believe that Judaism has great knowledge for every Jew, for every Israeli, and I work a lot to expand the possibilities of Jewish studies for all Israelis, try to bring in movers and shakers and to create a new discussion in Israel regarding Judaism and the future of Zionism. I left Kolot after 21 years because I felt I want to enter a different kind of, I would say, mindset. And I would say that it's going from survival Judaism to meaningful Judaism. And it's not about what is Judaism, but why Judaism. It isn't the same thing. What is about content, about thinking, about knowledge, about study, and why touches a whole different part of our body, of our mindset. And that is, what is the ultimate goal of all of this? And I think this is a fresh question that when we're all in survival mode, it's hard to ask the why question because you're surviving. And in many ways, survival is about the tree of knowledge, good and bad. It's about what separates us from the non-Jews, separates Shabbat from the everyday week. Havdalah is all about, separation. And I think that it's time to enter a new phase of Jewish life, which is the tree of life, which is about vitality, about intimacy, about the path of life that really gives us a deep feeling that we're alive. We're not just alive because we're reacting to something or we're judging or we're very smart, but because we feel that something deep inside is coming out, is flourishing. And how does the tree of life reflect the individual? How can it reflect me as an Israeli, a state that's motivated by the tree of life? So today I'm in this world of how do we go from survival to meaning? How do we change the centrality of the tree of knowledge, good and bad, to the uniqueness and the center, which I think should be the tree of life?
I would like, before we plunge in, I would like to say that for me, the thing that you've been doing since I've known you quite a few years ago is actually listening to the heart of Judaism, in the sense of the soul of Judaism, the way it is reflected, the way this wisdom and that beauty is reflected in our writings, in our history, in what being a Jew is, and through that, giving life to the environment that people around you, the natural environment that's there, the way you treat foreigners, the way you act with women. It's like we can flourish and we can grow and we can also develop in the most fundamental meaning of that word once we go to our source. And from there, ask the question of what is it that the times are asking of us? It's like, what is it that today we're called to do? What is this phase asking us to be and to know? And I think that that's exactly what we intend to do today. There has been, I think, a week and a half ago, students from the Rabbinic School of Ziegler have published a letter. It was in the midst of of the war, in the midst of the war in Gaza now. So it's maybe 2 weeks ago or something like that. And it caused a lot of reaction in the Jewish world. It caused, for some people, it caused agitation or pain or even fear. And in some, such as me, it created a lot of inspiration. And I heard very strong calling for me to listen to and to comply with. Since it brought up so much, we decided that we'd touch on that during this session, this live session, while we'll be listening through the Tree of Life, acknowledging the temptation or the reality caused when we look at things from the world of the tree of knowledge, the world of the mind, and the transition. The transition is not something that we move from a place to a place. It's more like the awakening, the realization that the tree of life is the source of everything, and it is what gives life at every moment of our lives to everyone. Okay, and that is it's not an option, it's not something we choose or choose not to. We can refuse, we can annihilate ourselves from it, but it is. So I hope with tenderness, humility, and slowly, we'll be touching on the issues, on some issues that we felt were calling us to reflect on, and again, to plant our feet in the wisdom of the soul, and then looking from there to see what we see. So I'll be reading the letter so that we have Rabbinical and Cantorial students appeal to the heart of the Jewish community. Blood is flowing in the streets of the Holy Land. Fires are burning on the hills of Jerusalem, and buildings are smoldering in Gaza. Violence is spilling onto the streets of Lod and Haifa. With each refresh of the news and each rocket that falls, new images of terror sear themselves into our minds. We find ourselves in tears. The tears that flow are different for each of us. For some of us, they are familiar tears. We've been moved by similar scenes that have played out for years and years in Jerusalem and beyond. For others, they are newer. Coming to terms with reality on the ground is a journey we all have come to differently. For many, we experience heartbreak over and over again with each new injustice. For these things, we weep. Lamentation 1:16. This year, American Jews have been part of racial reckoning in our community. Our institutions have been reflecting and asking, how are we complicit with racial violence? Jewish communities, large and small, have had teach-ins and workshops, held vigils, and commissioned studies. And yet, so many of those same institutions are silent when abuse of power and racist violence erupts in Israel and Palestine. So many of us ignore day-to-day indignity that the Israeli military and police forces enact on Palestinians, and sit idly by as Israel upholds two separate legal systems for the same region. And in the same breath, we are shocked by escalations of violence, as though these things are not a part of the same dehumanizing status quo. The current reality in the streets of the land, our tradition deemed holy, necessitate the spiritual crisis. A spiritual crisis requires more than prayer. It requires heartbreak, which demands reflection, which then demands action. Rabbi Elazar said, from the times of the destruction of the temple, the gates of prayer were locked. But even though the gates of prayer were locked, the gates of tears were not locked. As it states, hear my prayers, God, and give ear to my pleading. Keep not silent as my tears, at my tears. Psalms 39:13. We can only make change when we replace our watered down prayers for peace with tears of heartbreak. We can only build and rebuild when we start from our tears. For those of us whom Israel has represented hope and justice, we need to give ourselves permission to watch, to acknowledge what we see, to mourn and to cry, and then to change our behavior and demand better. As American Jews, our institutions tell stories of Israel rooted in hope for what could be, but oblivious to what is. Our tzedakah money funds a story we wish were true, but perpetuates a reality that is untenable and dangerous. Our political advocacy, too, often puts forth a narrative of victimization, but supports violent suppression of human rights and enables apartheid, it's a difficult word for me, in the Palestinian territories and the threat of annexation. It's far past time that we confront this head on. We can no longer shy away or claim ignorance. What will it take for us to see that our Israel has a military and controls the borders? How many Palestinians must lose their homes, their schools, their lives for us to understand that today, in 2021, Israel's police comes from a place of power, that Israel's actions constitute an intentional removal of Palestinians? I'm difficult with that also. How much say do we American Jews have? We are here, not there. What can we do? When we teach about Israel, we can endeavor to tell the messy truth of the persecuted people searching for safety, going to a land full of meaning for the Jewish people, full of meaning for so many other people, and also full of human beings who didn't ask for new neighbors. When we vote, we can vote for leaders who won't continue paying lip service to peace while funding violence. We can use our position as citizens of Israel's biggest benefactor to push to regulate and redirect funds in equitable ways that promote a peaceful and just future. When we pool our philanthropy and direct our giving, we can pay attention. Is our tzedakah supporting those who build peace or those who sow hate and violence disguised in the name of justice and Jewish community? Is it supporting those who plant trees with their neighbors or those who are planting over their neighbor's home? We are the future leaders of the Jewish community. We are training to teach the Torah and lead the rituals that will hold our joy and our sorrow. And we are full of tears. We implore you, our community, our students, teachers, congregations, employers, funders, to find your tears too. Tap into the empathy that you need to feel and experience the reality on the ground in this place so that we can work to change it. The temple has long been destroyed, but the spiritual and ethical soul of the Jewish people will stand. We have the capacity for redemption and call out these abuses of power now. We have the ability to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with our God. We have the chance to do it now, right now, and to keep making that voices each day. When the Temple Mount is burning, when the alleyways are home to violence, when children lose their parents and parents lose their children, Rabbi Elazar tells us that weak condemnation of violence are not enough. We need something bigger, deeper, rawer, more transformative than that. We need to look at the reality we've been denying, allow ourselves to feel that hurt, and build from there. Because while the gates of prayer may be closed, the gates of tears remain open.
If I may just say a few words about where I feel you are looking right now. I think that tears come from the abuse that the tree of life feels when the tree of knowledge, good and bad, is too dominant. And that's the moment that the tears cannot hold inside and they shed out and surface. And I feel that you strongly feel that this letter is saying that we lost the connection to the tree of life, and the tree of knowledge has totally dominated our reality in Israel. That's what I feel, the nigun beyond the words that you read so beautifully.
I think that it's very accurate with one maybe emphasis, that I think that this letter wouldn't have been written and it wouldn't have been addressed to other people if they wouldn't know, that students who wrote this wouldn't know that we can never disconnect from the tree of life. Actually, what they're saying to me is, if I listen to it personally, which that's the way I'm reading this letter. I'm saying that I'm hearing that they're saying to me, although it was directed to the Jewish community in the United States, or maybe only the conservative, I'm not sure. When I read this letter, what I heard is that it was an act of belief in me. They were calling me to know my nature, to listen again to my soul, to understand that this is not something that I'm disconnected from, but I got lost. We got lost, and we need to remember. But it's not that I'm not in the tree of life. It's always there, but I'm not listening to it, to this in me, but to the things I've grown to believe that were me, or that were Israel, that were us.
It really feels to me like, also regarding to what you're saying, Mordechai, sometimes I can really see things like visually. So we used to think of the tree of knowledge and the tree of life also according to like the way art and like the picture of it is that they are separated. They are one next to the other and we go here or we go here. But now that we're talking, and while you were reading this, like in the last sentence, Ruti, I could really see the journalists and the hosts in the news and in the television, when they sit and they talk and they discuss all those life events. And And I'm sometimes asking myself, what would it look like if they had a moment to cry, to sit in silence and not talk? And then I could see that it's like sometimes there's the tree of life, yeah, that, like you say, it doesn't go anywhere. This is what we are. This is not a choice. We are life. It's physics, yeah, biology. We are life. But then I could feel like the tree of knowledge, it's like sitting on me like a layer, and it makes the tree of life, it's like it's disappearing. It's like a tree inside a tree, and all we can all that we communicate is from those external layers. This is how we meet. This is how we filter the reality. Yeah, this is our identity. This is our culture, our knowledge. So this is what I feel in the letter. They are like calling to what you call the soul, the wisdom of the soul, the wisdom of the tree of life. And like you say, Mordechai, and sometimes you can see this in the news with reporters and stuff, you see like the knowledge is cracking, and suddenly there's like a fracture of soul. They have no words. You see it in their eyes. They are shaken, like the name of this live session. The tree of knowledge, the layer cracks. Because like you say, Mordechai, the tree of life cannot take this. And this is when we cry. It's overfloating, it's overwhelmed. And tears are not made of words. They're not made of thoughts.
I'd like to share two thoughts I have after reading the letter. First of all, I feel that this letter and other expressions are calling me to ask the core question of the return to Israel. And let's be more specific. What is the Temple Mount symbol? What are we actually returning to? I've been in this question in the past few years. After many years, I totally denied this question. I was just here and happy to be here and part of a flourishing country, did my army service, served in war. But I never asked, what does Temple Mount, what is this, aliyah laregel, this wanting to come close all about? And just recently, I really understood that Temple Mount is really about Etz HaChaim. It's about a place where there is no ownership. There is no, I would say, masculine domination of the world, but there's a real prayer for all nations. There's a real place that people under one God can really feel the vitality of differences of colors. And this for me is a very powerful understanding that the center of all of this is Etz HaChaim. And in our prophets,
Etz HaChaim is the tree of life, I'm just saying.
The tree of life is at the core, is at the essence of all of the Zionistic return to the land. And that's something very important for me to remember, that that's the essence, that's where we're going to. And what does that mean regarding our neighbors, regarding non-Jews? What does it mean regarding Jews? How do Jews talk about the tree of life? What does this mean for a Haredi Jew, for an Orthodox Jew? What does this mean for a Levite Jew? What is our tree of life? That's a discussion that I am so much eager to create to do. That's one thing I want to share. The second thing is, I would really like to talk to the students at Ziegler about what are their trees about.
What? Sorry, maybe you can talk a bit closer to the...
I will try. I would like to speak to American Jews and have a discussion, not about what's going on in Israel, are you for and against it. I'm much more about what is your vision? What is your Temple Mount in your life? What is the Etz HaChaim? What is the tree of life for you? And I would say something a bit more complicated right now. I feel as an Israeli that I'm struggling between two trees. When a pilot has to send a bomb into a house in Gaza, knowing that there's a slight chance that people who aren't part of the Hamas will be injured. And that's the reality of war. War is never, how do you say, meduyak? It's never precise. There are always prices paid beyond the specific target. That's the definition of war with all the ugliness of war. So we are dealing here with a reality of using power. How do we balance power? How do we sometimes overuse power, and do we cry? Do we remember all the time the tree of life essence of all of this? But I would like to understand, where is this struggle in diaspora Jews? What is their tree of knowledge, reality? What is the tree of life for them? Because I feel that in Israel, we're dancing this dance. It's a very difficult dance. In two past historical moments, we didn't succeed in holding on to the land because we didn't know the art of the dance, because we weren't connected to the tree of life. But it's a dance. It's an amazing dance. As a second generation Holocaust survivor, it's the most meaningful thing to say, yes, I'm part of this dance. Of how does my son go to war? How did I go to war? What does that mean? And I would really like to understand, even have a dialogue with the Ziegler students, and have a lot of respect to Rabbi Artson, the head of the school, who's a friend. And we spoke about this in the past, but let's start talking about the trees together. I think that's a discussion that is so much missing today.
So when you talk about the dance, you're talking about the dance of the two trees in us.
Yes, yes. I think that the reality in Israel is that we cannot just live a world of imagine of John Lennon. We can't just talk about, the days of peace. There's a reality here that forces us to use power. And it's not a great reality, it's a sad reality. And I think that Israelis are part of this dance, and I don't feel that we're doing a terrible job. I feel better about where we are. I must say this honestly. I know when a person goes to a roadblock, he can see two different narratives. But I see a nation that a great part of it has quest for peace, has no language, no inner spiritual understanding, not of trees, not of the river of Eden. But I think that there is a real quest here for letting go of the power narrative. That is my political, little take here, which is a bit different than the political statements that we shouldn't talk about, about the letter. But yes, I think we're in a special dance here in Israel.
I think that's a good place in time to look at the tree of knowledge and, look it straight in the eye and ask, where have you brought us? That's actually why I'm so moved by this letter. Although there are inaccuracies and there are really things that might be difficult to understand from afar, but still listening to our soul, which is not another part of us. This is what we are. This is where we stem from. This is the origin of all. So when I let myself plant my feet there and look from there, I would find a different way of looking at things fundamentally. There would be things that I would not allow myself to do. And there will be things that suddenly will become very simple and self-evident because they are at last looked at from the right place, from the source, and not from the wisdom we've been created. You know, maybe we call the tree of knowledge the tree of knowledge, but for me it's the tree of the mind, meaning the illusion or it looks to me many times is an hallucination that draws me to believe that that the world is what our thoughts tell us. The ability of the mind to grasp things, to call them by names, and it's like, maybe I would even call it the tree of understanding, the tree of the wish to understand and control, because this is actually
the difference between wisdom and knowledge.
Yeah, and also, but knowledge can also come from the soul. We know things. It's like we know in Hebrew, it's yadata isha. It's you know a woman because you're one with her. This knowledge can come from, in Judaism, there's also the concept of thinking with the heart. Now there's the thinking with our brain or our mind, and there is the thought that comes from the heart, which is not feely. It is a different kind of wisdom that shows itself. So what I'm saying is that if we look at the reality we've created ourselves in Israel, okay, the sense of being, that we have rights, that we are supposed to be here, that we were persecuted, and that we are supposed to have a state of our own, on the one hand. And on the other hand, we allowed ourselves to think that that can be done on the expense or victimizing other people. And we said that we have no choice. That is the reality that the tree of knowledge takes to, because the tree of knowledge is trying to solve and to create ways of doing things and paths that our mind shows us, that we as human beings create. And we are, as human beings, with no offense, are very, very limited, especially if we compare ourselves to God. So when I look at the actual knowledge that we've created, it's very limited, it's very fragile, it's an either or, always an either or. Even if we say that we strive for peace, there will come a time, and it doesn't take long for it to show itself, that says, well, I wish I could, but you know, I can't. I wish I could, but there's no choice. The tree of life does not present such a possibility, meaning the truth does not present such a possibility. That means that if I plant my feet in the tree of life, I transform. I am transformed by the tree of life, meaning that this image that I had of myself becomes the image of God. Now, it has always been the image of God, but I refused out of arrogance, out of the thought that we need to control, and then fear that came in, that showed itself and started to run everything that we do, or much that we do. That's what happened there. And then we come to a place where we say, well, we did our best, but our best is terrible, because our best is always an either or. It's always someone paying a big price. And since we're one, it's never someone paying a big price. That's why tears are so relevant in this letter, because the tears are lamentation. What do we lament on? That's how you say. What we lament on is what you said to me that I'm crying for. or because we went astray. We forgot our true nature. We explained it so well that we believed what we said, but this is wrong. We understood it incorrectly. And if we allow ourselves to mourn, if we allow, as they write exactly, if I allow myself to see how much I tried to not hurt, to acknowledge this, to acknowledge our true striving for peace, which is in the hearts of the people. And I believe what you said, this is how it is. And if I see that, if I come with compassion to ourselves, saying we are a new state, okay, 70 and so years are not so much still. We're still in the making in many senses. We're still establishing ourselves. We're still coming to terms with the fact that we have a state and we're not now victims, but we have power to get used to how to use this power correctly, morally.
I feel like we're in high school in terms of a person.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so that is a place that needs to be acknowledged. Okay, it needs to be acknowledged, and we did much good, and yet we went astray and we got lost in many senses. People here in Israel feel that very strongly. Some of the people whom I was talking about when I read this letter said that they don't hear anything new there in the letter. But I think that there is something very clean. I was talking also to many Arab friends, Palestinian friends, who said, this is a great letter because it calls you to live your soul. And if you live your soul according to the wisdom of the soul, to the love of the soul, then everything here would be good for everyone. We need you to do this. It's not that we are happy, we cry with you because all of us are suffering because you are denying what you really are. And that causes much pain. So the tree of life is calling us, and I feel that this letter is demanding of me. It's not only calling me nicely, although it's not directed to me, but it says, rise up. Don't wait. Don't say that it's the best you can do. If you say it's the best you can do, then you are in the tree of knowledge. It's how you say litbol. It's not to dip, it's to
immerse.
It's like, yeah, it's, if I use the word, please don't, it's like baptizing myself in the tree of life. Okay, it's like going to the mikveh. It's like I go to this life, I go to these waters, and I let them take whatever was avodah zarah, was idolatry that I've been holding on to, not knowingly or knowingly. Let it go. And then just be there in the tree of life, looking at what it shows me and where it calls me and what it tells me that time has come.
Can I not interrupt, but jump in and take us to something like in life, in the situation, in the conflict? And I actually want to ask you, Mordechai, now with what you said a few minutes ago and with what Ruti said now, let's say you're talking about this pilot and in a time of war, you mentioned you and you mentioned your son. So it is very personal. It is not something we're talking about that is out there and we're philosophizing about it. No, this is very, very vivid. So what would it look like? Maybe it's a challenging question and you can take the time. What would it look like to act in a situation that is calling for violence, that is maybe at the moment, this is how it is. Yeah, not maybe, yeah. When we are called to live in reality as it is, what would it look like to approach the situation like dropping a bomb, coming from the tree of life? And is this even possible?
I think it's the question that we should all be silent over for some time. It's a very essential question. And anything that I can say will not give the answer. I think you asked the question for me. Not only about war.
Can you say again?
You're asking the question for me, which is only about words. It's also about male-female relationships. It's about so many things. How do we enter this world with presence, masculine presence, feminine presence, but how do we have presence in this world coming out of the tree of life? But I will say two things. One thing is, it's an answer from the tree of knowledge, which I did many years in Kolot, which is give classes on balancing power. That's a tree of knowledge answer. Balance your power. And I think it's important. I think the army tries to do that to some level. Don't overuse your power. But this whole mindset is a mindset of knowledge, of ethics. Ethics itself is coming out of the tree of knowledge. And I think that's important. There are people that's their language, and you have to talk with them about how to create a Jewish roadblock. How do you sit 3 months in a place, go crazy, and breathe well when you want to overuse your frustration? Let's put it that way. But I think that there's something else, which is a very political understanding. And as we're talking, I think that a two-state solution is coming from the tree of knowledge, good and bad, or a dual option. And I believe that this land of Israel, this soil of Israel, is calling for a two-state, a two-nation solution for a Temple Mount, which is one. It's a whole different dimension of saying, let's separate. It's a call to ask, what is life about? What's the essence of Judaism? What's the essence of all the religions? And I think this is a more realistic approach, by the way. I'm not saying this as something messianic. I just don't think that this land is going to allow this separation. Go back to the tree of knowledge concept that many of my friends on the left want so much. Let's like Abraham and Lot. Let's separate the land into two pieces. I think this land is calling us for an Etz HaChaim, a tree of life solution. It's more complicated, but that is something that we can start with ourselves at home, and then talk about this. When God told Abraham, "V'hiyeh bracha," you should be a blessing. Abraham is the father of all the people in this country. So let's talk about what does it mean to be a blessing together. I think this angle, which may sound very spiritual, I think it's very realistic. And for me right now, it's the only solution that I believe will stand in this land.
Ruti, do you see something about my question?
Yeah. I think the thing we're not noticing enough is that everything that we as human beings create is fragile and reaches an end. It's like it has its length, but then it has no more. When that happens, when we find ourselves coming back again and again to the same solutions, doing the same actions, taking the same actions, using even the same words, we can absolutely know for sure that we are in our minds, that we are in the tree of knowledge, meaning we think that we understand, we've created the world, an imaginary world that we live in. It creates feelings, strong ones. It creates realities in the sense of sensual reality, tangible reality, and yet it is our creation. It is idolatry. It is something that we put our order, our understandings, our existence in the middle of it. That's why it's so limited, fragile, and causes so much suffering. We need to look, as I see it for now, as of now, we need to look for these ends, these places we reach that do not give life, that give suffering and hatred, and in either or. So if I'm a pilot in a helicopter and I need to decide whether I'm going to move this curtain of bullets that creates like it creates an option for one side for the Israeli soldiers to withdraw when rioters come, and the commander on the ground gives instructions for him to move this curtain so that it creates more time for the Israeli soldiers to withdraw. But he knows, the pilot knows that if he does that, he's going to kill many people. What he said to me was that nothing in the way he was taught to be a pilot, and this is a very fundamental course, and pilots in Israel are taught very thoroughly, and I must say even with a lot of humanity and even spirituality. But at that point, he said, nothing I've studied or encountered in my past could give me directions of how to deal with that. And he said, I don't remember what went on there. I just knew that I wasn't going to do automatically what I was told to do. That was acknowledging the end. There is something here that the mind tells me to do, that minds of other people told me to do, but it is not accordingly to my soul. And he said, I don't remember what happened. It was a second or two. But he said, I remember that it was like, I wasn't there as I know myself. And then after that, I knew what to do. It was very silent. It was very sharp. And what I did, the result of what I did was very beneficial for all sides involved. And he said also that he never felt so good with any decision that he made as he felt there. What it means is that as much as we acknowledge that we are living most of our lives from the tree of knowledge and not stop there, but acknowledge its limitedness, acknowledge the illusion of the promises, the tree of life, the tree of knowledge promises, because the tree of life, the tree of knowledge was we ate from the tree of knowledge because we wanted to understand, because we wanted to control, because we wanted to have our way, okay, because we wanted to be equal partners. Well, we can't. Okay, we are called to be wonderful, responsible participants in the creation of God, but we are not God. And thank God for that. So that is actually what we're called to do. We're called to come back to our precise, accurate place of really being a participant in this creation, meaning that I plant my feet in the creation, in the tree of life, knowing that whenever I see no way, it means that I'm looking for my mind. Look straight in the eye to my mind, into the angle from which I was looking, and then coming back to the tree of life without understanding. What we do when we come out of the tree of life is not a result of an understanding or a conclusion. It emerges from wisdom, which is love, which is beauty, which is everything. And when I mean beauty, I don't mean this is beautiful, but I mean the beauty. When I say love, I don't mean I love you, maybe also, but what I mean is we are love. And this is not John Lennon. I mean, maybe it is a true John Lennon, but it's not what we call John Lennon. Okay? It's not being hippies. It's not being pacifists. It's not that. It's coming from a place where there are no tools, so there is no war in the sense that we know it. Okay? Everything is part of a revelation. That's why what you said, I loved so much what you said, because even if we talk about temporal separation, if it comes from like divorce, for example, we can divorce in a way that enhances our oneness. And we can divorce from a place which creates separatedness, hatred, loneliness. This is the question. The question is, where do we come from? And it's not our choosing, in the sense that, well, in a way it's our choosing, but it's not a choice between the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. It's the choice we're called to make between acknowledging the tree of life and knowing that this is what it is and has always been, or suffering and create suffering. That's the choice we can make. There's no other choice.
Can I add something? I think there's a very important, I think the question is a very important question, but I think that what I am concerned about is, what is the center of the mindset? Is the center of the mindset the army service, those moments in life where we have to sometimes even shed blood? Or is the center of our life our intimacy at home, the places that really create our tree? And I think that sometimes in Israel, the post-trauma syndrome of so many Israelis is because the tree of knowledge conquered the homes, conquered the reality. So I don't know what to tell a pilot, but I do know how to start a fresh home. That's not based on the tree of knowledge, but based on the tree of life. And then when that person, soldier, will have to do his duty service, he knows where he comes from and he knows where Temple Mount is, what it really means. And in the middle of all this, we have our survival, moments. But if you know where you come from, and this really goes back to our former discussion in Hebrew about men and women relationships and these trees, and where are we going to as a society, it may give even a dance when you have to press the button of sending a rocket, maybe.
So when it will be possible for you, Mordecai, I really wish from here to do another session, another live session about feminine and masculine in these times. Because again, exactly as we talked about nations or the Jewish soul or Judaism, same goes for masculinity and femininity. Both, I must say, not only one, they both. How would it look like if they plant their feet? All of us, we plant our feet in the tree of life. How would it look like? Because we've been trying to find solutions. As much as we've been trying to find solutions, the problems have grown bigger. So that's a sign to say, well, we've been walking the wrong paths. We're called now to really plant our feet in the right place, and then from there look and see, giving ourselves more to it. Okay.
When we talk next time, I also want to address what you said, Ruti, that things, the more we try to look for solutions, the worse things get.
Yeah.
I want us to look at this too. What are the
Great.
measurements? How do we say if it got better or worse, by which, from where we're looking at? And so that's also something, especially in gender and masculinity and femininity, men and women. And
yeah. Good.
Okay, so it looks like we have
I'll just say that the head of the Ziegler School of Rabbinic School wrote also a wonderful letter, which I didn't have the time here to read, but I think that the respect and the love that were conveyed in this letter were an inspiration for me also, and I think for many others. And I do wish that we would let the boat be rocked in Israel so that we can listen better, much better, to those voices coming to us from our brothers and sisters and soulmates. Maybe that's the most accurate description that we can use.
I will add the links to the letters,
right,
to the Facebook and the YouTube. So this is an ongoing inquiry.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you very much.
Bye.